Today's guest is Mary Joyce, and she is a investigative journalist and researcher who looks into various paranormal topics, most notably Bigfoot, extraterrestrials, UFOs, the Cherokee Little People, and several other topics. And I'll put her website in the description, and I advise everybody to go check it out because there's a lot of really cool stuff over there. She's been on Coast to Coast AM, the Travel Channel, and has worked also for several media publications. Mary, welcome.
Good to see you. How you doing?
Not bad, not bad. How about yourself?
I'm really glad I'm not out there in the West Coast with all that snow and rain and mudslides and avalanches, and I'm very happy to be in North Carolina.
North Carolina is a very beautiful place. I used to live up in Georgia, and I'd go up
Northern
there.
Georgia is similar to where I'm at. Yeah,
Yep,
it's very pretty up there.
very true. I think, do you know Preston Dennett?
Not personally, but I certainly know him.
Okay, I think he lives up there in North Georgia, near that area, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, he's a UFO researcher for those that don't know. So, Mary, if you don't mind, I'm curious how you got into all this paranormal research.
How about a big fat curiosity? And I see some stuff that just doesn't seem to fit, and I really like to find out the answers to things. So that's the simple answer. But then when I moved to North Carolina, I moved into a hot spot and didn't even know it. We have UFOs and underground bases and Bigfoot and Cherokee Little People, and it just keeps on coming. So I ended up in a hot spot and didn't know that's where I was headed.
I think that's how a lot of us get into this curiosity. And then, did you have like a personal experience with something?
Are we sticking with the Bigfoot project? The Bigfoot, that was not a personal experience that got me started in that. There was people around me that lived in the Cashiers area. And by the way, Cashiers is a mountaintop community in Western North Carolina, and it's kind of a focal point for a lot of this activity. I since have seen and investigated an awful lot of stuff on my own, but a personal experience didn't start it.
Okay, gotcha. And thanks for reminding me. Yeah, we're going to be talking about Bigfoot mostly on this one, and we might get into some of the other stuff as well, probably towards the end of it. But I do want to focus on the Bigfoot because I think that's something that is something I want to look more into. And I know a few people. I know a guy. He's a shaman, and he was telling me some very interesting stuff about Bigfoot and their spiritual capacity and some interdimensional stuff. So we'll look into that as well. So with the Bigfoot stuff specifically, what got you into that? Was it just the curiosity, like you said, or
It was
something
people
else?
having experiences in this area that began to share them with me. And one of the most complete stories happened rather early on. Just imagine being at the top of a ridge in Western North Carolina on a gravel road. And then you take another gravel road between two ridges and you go down about a mile. And then there's this little valley that opens up. And I call it the Valley of the Bigfoot. And this story contained everything. In the beginning, the people were terrified. The woman who lived on the property actually got herself a bodyguard with a gun because she was so afraid. Um, we finally figured out why the Bigfoot were so pissed. But in my book about the Bigfoot, I have pictures of them with their fingerprints all over the doors and their footprints and their scratch marks where they were banging in doors and starting car engines and um, the people had always sensed that there was something unusual on the land. But then suddenly it became a problem. In hindsight, we figured out what it was. And in this little valley, they had dammed up a creek to make a pond. And one day, a man was out there with a jackhammer repairing the dam. And he went right through the ground, and all the water drained down. Well, we figured out in hindsight that this was a cave where the Bigfoot lived, and they were pissed that their headquarters had been flooded. Can't blame them. And so for a while there, they were doing nothing but getting back at the people who had destroyed their home. Um, but it evolved into something really unusual because one of the gals who's very telepathic went out to the area where this had happened, and she began to telepathically tell them that nobody meant for that to happen. It was a mistake, and kind of apologized. And eventually, the Bigfoot left a little gift at their door. It looked like they'd taken an old piece of burlap. They had several shiny objects in it. And after that, they quit causing trouble. It's like once they understood that that wasn't intentional, they backed off. But in the process, they busted into the house. And it was a family. It wasn't just adults, because we had different size footprints. And when they got in the house, you could see where the young ones had gotten crayons that the older children once had and were drawing on the walls. It was all down below the light switches. So we knew it was the little ones that were doing that, because the big ones would have to really hunch down to get that low to do the scribbles on the wall. So in my book, which is called Bigfoot Beyond the Footprints, I've got pictures of all this that I'm mentioning to you right now. And it's fascinating to look at their scribbles on the wall, and even attempts to maybe try writing or drawing. And the gift, that's incredible. A gift was left at the door. So we go from everybody being scared to death to they became friends.
Did they ever get a picture or a video of these things doing it, or was it just fingerprints and
Oh,
sort of the after effects?
if you get into Bigfoot in any big way, it's incredible if you ever get a real picture of them. They don't like their pictures taken, and they can tell that you're going to do it before you do it. And I've been close enough where I've heard them, and I've seen their footprints right next to me, and still can't see them. And one time after I got into this in a big way, one of the mountain guys took me up to another ridge and on private property. And he had a machete. At first, I thought it was to protect us, but it was to cut a path through the woods. And when we started heading toward this cave he was going to show me, we heard this like a whistle kind of a sound. It sounds like a cross between a whistle and a bird. It's neither of those. It's a sound often associated with the Bigfoot. And then in the direction we were headed, there was an answer, the same kind of whistle bird sound. And then everything got quiet. And it was like one Bigfoot was telling another Bigfoot, these humans are headed in your direction, be careful. And it was a good sized cave. In the book, I have a picture of it. It's about roughly 8 feet across and 5 feet high. You could not see the back of it. I'm chicken. I did not venture into the cave for several reasons, because we also have panther and some other creatures in this area, and I had no weapon and no protection, and so all I got was a picture of the cave. But like I said, there were footprints going up the slope right next to where I first heard the first whistle.
Has anyone gone into that cave and explored it? And what do you think would happen if they encountered them?
I even the man who owns the property has not gone into that cave. I think there's basically we all have this fear or a protective mode that we have. Even me, after doing a lot of research with the Bigfoot, I would want to see a Bigfoot coming across the field slowly in my direction rather than suddenly pop up right in front of me, because my heart would probably go crazy. So you just kind of have to be you really have to be prepared psychologically to have an encounter. And I do think the Bigfoot know that. And there was one man, he was a good witness because he was a former sheriff from Florida. He wasn't an old man, but he had gotten cancer, so he had to quit his job. He moved to North Carolina. He started raising organic food and trying to get healthy. And he was in a very remote part of the forest. And he had a whole bunch of experiences. And one day, let me set the picture a little bit more. He was near a creek off an old logging road. So we're in a remote area. He's sitting somewhat elevated on his porch, and he hears the sounds like children playing in the creek. And he knows there's no children around there. So he's going, what is this? Well, they were two, quote, teenage Bigfoot that were playing in the water. There was a regular path that he could see them. He had a light by like his garage, and he could see them cross this same path all the time. And he eventually became friends with the male Bigfoot, and he named him Fred. And he and Fred just got along, and they communicated telepathically, which is like universal among creatures. And when the man was down in his garden, the Bigfoot would show up, and he would share things. The man would share things from his garden with the Bigfoot, and they just became, friends. So he's one who did actually see him or see a Bigfoot and interact with him on a regular basis.
Oh, that's amazing. So it seems like they all communicate telepathically, like you said, because you mentioned the lady that spoke to the ones that had their house flooded, and then this guy. Does that mean that they can sort of just read our thoughts and then they can project them towards us so we can hear theirs or something?
Two answers. First of all, they do speak. And we've posted a number of recordings over the years where they're not yelling and howling like you get to hear more often than not, but where you can actually hear something that definitely sounds like a spoken language. So they do communicate at that level. But in communicating with humans, it's telepathic.
So that kind of opens up the door to like their level of evolution or advancement spiritually or metaphysically or whatever it is. Um, Now, I think if you watch the History Channel or something, they make it seem like the Bigfoot and Sasquatch are just these stupid creatures that are unevolved. But what you're describing is that they're actually maybe more advanced than we are. Is that kind of accurate?
I think we can't lump them into one category. I do believe there's different levels of evolvement. For example, the ones that are down in Florida that are smaller, they're often called the swamp apes. I've never heard any enlightening stories from that part of the country. We hear quite a few here in the mountains of North Carolina. Also, the Bigfoot here are a little bit bigger than the ones in Florida. And then we have the ones out west, and we get the extremes in the west. We get those who absolutely don't want any humans around, and that's where you get the stories of, confronting people. So just like humans, we have different types of Bigfoot, or different attitudes. Let's put it that way. Different approaches. Or
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Similar maybe to the ETs. Some people think they're all good, they're all bad. It's probably a mix here and there.
I agree. It's absolutely a mix. And if people start to interact with ETs, I think they better pay attention to their gut feeling. If you feel very unsettled and nervous about it, just stay away from it. Those who interact with what I would call the good guys, they usually have a great sense of peace, and they don't have fear raging inside them. And you got to trust those gut feelings, because I absolutely believe and also base that on interviewing people with firsthand experiences, that you've just got to listen to your gut feeling.
Yeah, I think that's some good advice. Have you ever tried to telepathically communicate with them?
We were doing that with that episode with the pond draining into their cave. Um, all of us were trying to do that, but we had one woman who seemed to be stronger at it, and so we let her take the lead. And she got through to them because clearly the problem stopped after that. We also did some interesting experiments. Again, just out of curiosity, we knew where the paths were that these Bigfoot would take. We knew that they liked apples because there was an apple tree, and you could see where they went there for treats. But we decided that we would start experimenting to see what kind of foods they liked, and we put out all sorts of stuff. Basically, they're like human children. They like um, nuts and apples and bananas. And what they don't like, surprisingly, is an orange. And maybe it's too citrusy. I don't know, but they wouldn't eat that. But we would put things out just to see what they would react to. By the way, they hate asparagus. They spit that out, literally spit it out. Um, we also did an experiment with containers. And at first, we were putting things out in like a cooler that you would carry a six pack in, that had the handle, you'd take it on a picnic. And we'd leave the lid just a little bit cockeyed. As long as that handle was there, they would not put their hand in it. They would push it over and get stuff out. We put a basket with a handle, same thing. When we put a basket out without a handle with food in it, they took it down the path with them. And so I suspect that they have had an experience of sticking their hands in something that looked like it might be a trap, and they weren't going to fall for it again, is kind of the feeling I got from that.
Yeah, I'm sure they have a lot of mistrust towards humans.
And yet we have a wonderful story here in North Carolina that happened a couple winters ago, and it made the national news. There was a little boy. He was lost. I think it was 3 nights and 2 days, or 2 days and 3 nights, one or the other, in the winter, in the eastern part of the state. And when they found him, even though it was really cold, he was fine. And he said that essentially he said a bear had taken care of him. Well, first of all, wintertime, you don't have the bears are hibernating. Two, we have no reports of bears being benevolent to human beings, especially that time of year, because their appetites are raging and they're more likely to eat them than to save them. So it was probably the only word a 3-year-old knew to describe a Bigfoot. I did some research on that and found that there had been a number of Bigfoot sightings in the adjacent counties. So that's a Bigfoot being nice and being caring for a child. And over the years, I've heard a number of stories where children, especially, have been in trouble, and the Bigfoot have taken them back to where their parents are, or have done things to save the little kids. So there's a very similar spirit between many of the Bigfoot. And again, I'm not getting the creepy stories here where I am. I certainly hear them. I certainly have heard them. But that's not what we're hearing around here. We're hearing the human side. And I mean the human side in a good way, because the way humans are acting, I'm not sure that's always a compliment.
Right. Yeah. People are out there hunting and causing chaos and stuff. It sounds like the ones that are up there are maybe a little bit more advanced or evolved than some of the other ones, or at least just friendly.
They also, pretty much all of them, no matter where you are, really just don't want to be bothered with humans for the most part. And uh, one of the witnesses said that the Bigfoot regard us and our thoughts as like blaring, I don't know, megaphones. And they can hear our thoughts and our intentions and feel us coming in their direction long before we would be aware of it. And that's why some of these shows on TV of finding Bigfoot are just ridiculous, because the Bigfoot are too smart for the most part to get caught that way.
So you were saying that they really don't like being photographed. I think we might only have a couple photographs out there that may be legit, maybe they're faked, I don't know. How do you think that they avoid detection like this? Obviously, you mentioned the fact that they can sense our essence, read our thoughts and intentions. But do they potentially have a way to cloak themselves or something? Do you think?
Uh, that is so debatable. And I would say that yes, they are able to I get more reports that they are able to disappear from sight. So they probably just turn up their frequency. And I'm hearing that from witnesses that have long-term exposure to the Bigfoot, and they're pretty convincing witnesses. And it seems that they're able to do some things that you and I, unless you're special, have not been able to do.
Yeah, that's what I heard. So I had a guy on, Todd Wilcox, that calls himself the slipstream shaman, and he said he was tapping into their energy once, and that he got this very interdimensional vibe from them, in that they could travel vast distances, sort of kind of like what you alluded to, in that they could elevate their frequency and just travel and then come back, step down back into the physical plane or something like that. So maybe that's why we've never really seen one.
Um, we have occasionally gotten some pictures that I find convincing. There was one, let's see if I can remember how the story goes. This happened in Tennessee, and the man, who is a big guy, I think he's at least 6'5", and he's very interested in the Bigfoot. and he went to out in the woods, and he said he saw something. It looked like a hole in the ground, but then the hole started to move, and he's going, "That's impossible." Well, it was a dark baby Bigfoot who was scared to death of this huge human, and he went hiding into the woods, hiding under a tree. The man managed to snap a picture, and it was kind of convincing that he had really gotten this young Bigfoot. But at a young age, it probably didn't know all the tricks of the trade.
Oh, that's really cool. Is that on your website?
Yeah, I can't tell you exactly where it is right now, but I since you're, uh, I'll try to get that information to you.
Yeah, I'll go on if I can find it. I'll link to it
Okay,
somewhere. Um, so now some of your work involved the Cherokee Little People, and I believe the Cherokee tribes are the ones up there in the Appalachian, right?
that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Now I would assume that they know something about the Bigfoot, right?
All of the native tribes seem to be very aware of the Bigfoot. They regard them as another clan rather than like an animal creature. Um, so, yeah, that's pretty universal.
Okay. And that would make sense. They're very tapped into the natural world. Do they, have you talked to them about their contact with them or anything? Or are they willing to share that with you? Or is that
Are we talking
mostly,
about little people now, or are we talking about Bigfoot?
oh, the Bigfoot?
The Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Um, One of the best stories I got actually wasn't here. I was out in South Dakota, and I met a woman. At the time, she was 29. She was the daughter of a shaman, no, the granddaughter of a shaman, and her brother was a shaman. And she had a lot of natural abilities, you could just tell. And she talked about the Bigfoot being out there in that part of the woods. And one of the, well, I'm going to skip around because she told me about Bigfoot and little people. She is one of the ones who told a creepy story about the Bigfoot. And she and her aunt and uncle were out hunting out in the country, out by a creek. And there was a Bigfoot who was going after the same deer that they were going after. And he was upset. That was his dinner, I'm sure. And he howled and yelled and screamed and banged on their vehicle. And, they couldn't get out of the vehicle because he was banging on the outside. So you kind of understand that if you've got a hungry Bigfoot and you've got these humans who can get food elsewhere, trying to take your meal, you can understand why he might fight for the dinner. But that was the only kind of darker side of the Bigfoot, and even that's understandable. Um, Regarding little people, her story was much cuter. She and I think some of her cousins or something took their grandmother out to fish on the creek, and they set her up in a chair, and then they went down the creek to play in the water. And they saw some bubbles, and they some movement of the water, and then they saw these little footprints going up the side of the creek. And at a later date, another relative and his buddies found a little cave along this creek, and they found these miniature things. They found a miniature drum, a miniature bow and arrow set, some other things, and they took them and they brought them back. And the grandfather got very upset. Don't take stuff from the little people because they will get pissed. And I guess the little people gave them a bit of trouble for a while, but they did return the items, and so the little people quit being a problem.
Could you briefly just tell people what the Cherokee Little People are?
They are not fairies. They're not little tiny elves or something like that. They almost always are in the 3 to 3.5 foot size. The caves that were found, or tunnels that were found here, are almost all built in like dense red clay. They're square cut with an arch top. The arch top gives strength to the tunnels. I first started to learn about the little people from the old timers who had worked on construction at Western Carolina University. And it's like every time they were building a new building and they were supposedly digging into virgin soil, they would run into these little caves, and they ran into little skeletons. And that's what I began to hear at first. And thank goodness there was this one man that I got to know from where I was working at the time. He was well respected in the community. He was a World War II hero. I'd been a pastor for like 40 years or more, and everybody respected him. And he said, no, the little people are real. And he talked about, as a young man, helping with construction on projects at Western Carolina University. And because of him, he connected me with these other old timers who I never would have met without him opening the door for it. So one year I spent a whole lot of Saturdays around kitchen tables interviewing these old timers. And I did it because nobody had recorded their stories. And all I could think of was these guys are mostly in their 80s and 90s. And when they die, their stories are going to die. And so it wasn't like, I got to write a book. It was like, I got to save this information. And so the book is Cherokee Little People Were Real.
And you found out that they were real, and then some of your research led you to you believing that they're still in existence, right?
Right. And if I had to do the book over again, I wouldn't say Cherokee Little People were real, because they're not real prevalent now, but we still get reports of little people in the backwoods of the mountains here, especially on the reservation.
That's really cool. So you mentioned that there were some archaeological digs or evidence that was uncovered from the construction of this university. Have you heard of any archaeological evidence of Bigfoot?
I'll tell you one thing that has, and I mentioned this in the book. There is a petroglyph, it's the largest one, I think, in the southeast. Oh, roughly, I think it's like 15 by 8 feet or something like that. And it has all these markings all over it. The Cherokee do not know what those mean. That is not their Cherokee language or symbolism. Occasionally you'll get somebody say, oh, I know what that means, and they're Cherokee and everybody thinks they know. But the old timers say, we don't know what that means. The reason I bring that up is because their legends talk about a giant. In English, it would be like Judaculla, and that Judaculla could jump from one mountain ridge to the other. Well, Bigfoot can jump, and Bigfoot is big like Judaculla. And we have sightings to this day in the area of this petroglyph, this big stone. And I think that the old stories with the Cherokee of the giant may very well be the stories of the Bigfoot.
Okay, well, yeah, I think I heard of that in one of your other ones. One of your other interviews, we were talking about Judacola, the giants, and maybe is there a mountain there as well?
That rock, that petroglyph, is called Judaculla Rock, and it's the one that's roughly 15 by 8 feet. And it's like just out in the middle of a field with a little foundation around it, and anybody can pull in there and take a look at it.
Okay. So I know that you look into the underground bases and stuff. Is that prevalent up there where you're at?
I knew not everything I've written about. I knew nothing about when I started, and at one time I was working here in North Carolina at a place where I was able to interact a lot with the people who came in. So over time, they would trust me. And so I got to hear a lot of these stories because over time, they trusted me enough to tell me their stories. And I eventually ended up learning about 5 different underground bases here in Western North Carolina. And it is something I had not expected. There's even one, and what's interesting is so many of these are under or near public land. There's one under the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. Well, that I think may be the most visited park in the country. How can that be? Well, there's parts of that park that really the tourists seldom get to. And there's an old road called Hindtoogie Road. That's as close as it gets to this entrance. And I was able to talk to people when this was being built. And the witnesses, for the most part, were former military. One of the more interesting witnesses was a man and his wife. They both had been military, and they were on the south side of Cherokee, and they saw this big truck pull up, and it had a big long trailer. And he said it was a decontamination trailer. I mean, I don't know what you call it, decontamination chamber on the back of this truck. And so he got out and started talking to the driver, and it was a woman, and she said she was waiting for, I think, 5 other trucks to meet there. And so this couple just stayed and watched, and the other trucks arrived. They all had tarps over the back of the trucks that all had U.S. Air Force written on them. And they also had escorts in white SUVs who were dressed in black and had, guns. So this couple followed this caravan, and they went to a campground called Smokemont, which is about as close as you can get to where this hidden entrance is. And as soon as they went through, they locked the gate to the campground. And but this same man became very curious, and he got pictures of what do you call it, cargo planes flying in and out of that area. Not that they would land, but he got pictures of it where the back entrance was still open. It hadn't totally shut. And he also saw Osprey helicopters that had what he called packages about the size of a railroad car that would be dropped in this area. It got real intense. There was a whole lot of stuff going on for at least 2 years, when clearly all this was being constructed. This Hind-Toogie Road that I mentioned, it was closed down, or part of it was closed down for 2 years. They said it was because there had been a water problem, or, runoff or whatever. There had been no problem like that at all. They simply wanted to get stuff in and out of there without the public being involved.
Right. They'll come up with some excuse like swamp gas.
Let me give you something before it flies out of my head. There were 2 guys that were witnesses that worked at the hatchery on Cherokee, and they noticed that the creek that filled the hatchery was getting really, really low. So they started hiking up the side of this creek to find out what in the world. They thought maybe beavers had built a dam or something. They got to the very top, and there is a reservoir up there that had gone completely dry. There was a 50,000 gallon tank in the middle of it, with pipes going out of it and into the ground. So water was being siphoned from that reservoir and shot down below for whatever was happening down below. So it's those kind of odd stories. You begin to piece them together. You go, oh my goodness, this must be real.
Yeah, you get to you start drawing conclusions, and you realize that there's something going on, and maybe you can't exactly prove it, but the evidence, leads you to that logical conclusion.
Also, at a number of these sites, people have heard the sound of machinery. Like one of the guys who, again, used to be with the sheriff's office, and he would drive in his Corvette at night because he loved it, up on the parkway. And he stopped at a place called Devil's Tower, or Devil's something. And it was at night. He got out. He felt a vibration, and he put his ear up to this rock, and he could hear mechanical sounds from beneath the ground. This particular location is immediately east of one of the underground facilities we learned about. And perhaps that facility extends underneath there also. So the sounds of machinery coming from beneath the ground also would support the idea that there's an underground facility going on. And they're not small. They're not small. The one that's near the parkway, at the time we first learned about it, was 6 stories deep, city size, self-sufficient. And that's from an insider's description of it. I posted that at one point on the website, and a man who was involved in high security projects and even would go to Washington, D.C. to train people, he sent a message that he had written confirming that what this first witness said was true, that it was, that this facility did exist. And he was very, very cautious. Uh, he, I found out he deliberately wrote his message in language he would not normally use. I mean, in a format he would not normally use, in a style that he would not normally use. He had the message delivered through somebody else to me. I've met him in person, so I know who he is. But ever since he gave me that information, he's never I've never had contact with him again. I'm sure that's for his own self-preservation.
Do you have any idea what might be going on up there?
I don't know if it's all the same thing. I'll give you the extreme example. We have one that we call Perry. It stands for Pisgah Astronomical Research Institute. It's an old not Cold War facility that would monitor satellites and back in the day. And supposedly that's all shut down and it's now just an astronomical research institute. But we still see strange things happening there. People who have worked at a nearby Christmas tree farm have seen them taking caged animals into that facility, at least in the past. One of the witnesses told me that they do things for mind control there and that they have the ability to wipe out the population in that area if they wanted to. Again, I can jump in with some of my firsthand experience. Each time I've gone out there, I've been with other people, and the closer I've gotten to that facility, your head begins to feel weird, and it's like it's unpleasant, and it's like, let's get out of here. I call it people repellent, and we already know from at least one witness that they're using electromagnetic technology for different purposes, and why not people repellent? But it's not a painful thing. It's just an unpleasant thing. It makes you want to go away. We've also had witnesses see people at the gate of this astronomical research institute who have been dressed in SWAT gear. At other times, the gate is wide open. You can go on through. Sometimes you can only get in there by appointment. So different kinds. Obviously, there's certain times when they don't want people there. Interesting follow-up. After I'd done the book, I was contacted by somebody who lives in that area, and he said they were feeling underground vibrations and stuff in that area again. So something new was going on. Well, I used Google Earth to start exploring the area, and I could see this heavy earth moving equipment right there on the grounds of this place. And there was this big hole. You could tell it was a big hole because it took two large tarps to mostly cover it. And you could see the edges that were still the deep, dark hole. They were taking the dirt out of the ground and spreading it out evenly over the hills so it wouldn't be like a pile to make it obvious. And so that indicates that since I first learned about that facility, it has been expanding.
On your website, have you provided like an overlay on a map where people can sort of map out where these things are?
In the book, I clearly have done that. What happens with the website is when I find new things, they get posted, and then I begin to realize I have so much. I better put in a form that people can sort through it quickly, and that's why I did the book Underground Bases Hidden in North Carolina Mountains.
Okay. Wow, you really look into a lot of really interesting topics. And for people that don't know, the that Appalachian region, it's very dense, especially in the summertime. I've been up there hiking. I mean, it's almost like a jungle, and it's all pretty much unrestricted terrain with a lot of slope. And it wouldn't be hard to hide something there.
And they're good at it. Let me mention another facility. There's one that's under Mount Mitchell. Mount Mitchell is the largest mountain east of the Mississippi. And according to the witnesses on that case, they have a facility there that's goes 20 stories deep. And they said that the side of the mountain looks like the side of a mountain, but then it'll open up like a door or like a warehouse entrance. But when it's shut, you would never know it was there. Heard a similar thing with things being found in the Linville Gorge. Most people know about the Linville Gorge because that's where, for probably centuries, they have had the Brown Mountain lights. But again, the witnesses have seen a perfectly normal mountain open up like an entrance.
Now, so you said that up there in that area, you've got the Cherokee Little People, you've got the Bigfoot, you've got the ETs, and the government underground bases. Now, it wouldn't be a stretch of the imagination to think that all of these things are connected in some way.
I know. And it's very, very hard to make a positive link. But when you see those things in such a concentrated area, it does make you wonder. It does make you wonder.
Yeah, I'd wonder if they know about the Bigfoot and the ETs, and maybe that's why they're there in the first place.
I think the underground facilities would be there with or without ETs and Bigfoot. There's multiple reasons why we have underground facilities. Some of it is just as simple as preserving things or preserving life. I think the elite have always had ways to head for the hills and head for the underground to be safe. And what's really almost become comical now is there is a hotel, and I'm Greenbrier, I think, in West Virginia or Virginia, right on the border, which is now open as a museum. But it was once a secret facility with, doors that would open and shut and hide. And but the technology has become so advanced that they don't mind showing people the way it used to be. So the technology they're using now with these underground facilities are truly cutting edge.
Do you think that these bases have connection to one another? So let's say they have one up in North America, in Northeast America, and then one out west or something. Do you think that they connect?
I don't know if they all connect, but I do believe, like here on the East Coast, that from Washington, D.C. down to Atlanta, there is like a underground subway system. And that's not based just on my own thinking. I had an Air Force young man who retired from the Air Force early, and he got very interested in all this and was exploring it. And he became very convinced that all these were interlocked. We've also had people who have felt the ground beneath their homes shaking, and they would hear grinding sounds, and but it would only last for a short amount of time. Well, in this particular case, we could connect the Perry underground facility with the one in Cherokee quite easily, and these people would feel this grinding underneath the ground only for a short amount of time when the tunnel was being built beneath their homes. And the boring machine that does this type of thing is huge. And it can go through about, I think, 7 miles a day or something incredible.
Yeah, I think Elon Musk has a company that does that too, doesn't he?
He probably has everything. He wants to own the world or the universe or Mars.
Yeah, that's more like it. The universe. That's probably accurate. Um, so before we get off planet or outside of the region in the Bigfoot topic, I vaguely remember hearing you something or talk about something about the archaeological evidence that was sort of covered up by the Smithsonian or something like that. Does that ring a bell?
My brain doesn't have it filed that way.
Oh, no,
I
no worries.
do know this. I do know the Smithsonian has been hiding for literally, I don't know, since the 1800s, the fact that there have been giants in our country, and it's just amazing. People would find these huge skeletons. They'd call in the Smithsonian because they thought they would be the best that would be the best institution to save these things, and those things disappear and nobody ever sees them again. For some reason, that part of our history somebody doesn't want us to know about. But giants have been found all over our country, or in many parts of our country, and certainly in other parts of the world. I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but that's what's coming to mind.
Okay, yeah, I think that's right. Why do you think they want to hide that from us? They don't think we can handle it or something?
I have run into so many things that are being hidden, and I'll give you another example. In my book Spy in the Sky, I talk about Antarctica. Antarctica, we found major entrances into Antarctica. And as soon as I posted those, great steps were taken to make those entrances disappear off of Google. Why? I can almost understand that a little bit, because if we indeed are working with ETs and we have an underground facility there, and that's an active entrance, they don't want everybody knowing that. So that would be my guess, but it can only be a guess. The book Spy in the Sky, I was fortunate enough to press the print screen button on my computer when I would find things, because so many times you would never find evidence of it ever again. And I'll go back to the entrance into Antarctica. When I first found it, within a day or two, that whole thing looked like somebody had poured ink over it. And then I went back again and I zoomed out so I could see two entrances at the same time. One was briefly, very briefly, labeled Hollow Earth Entrance. The other one, Hollow Earth Entrance 2. It was only there for a short amount of time. Eventually, the whole thing became like a snowfield, and you would never find any clue that there's an entrance there.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of weird stuff about Antarctica. Structures under the surface as it melts away, and maybe the ET connection and various things like that.
You're a man who likes to have the big, broad picture of things, and we began to find ancient cities as the ice is melting in Antarctica. Most scientists say that continent's been covered with ice for about 34 million years. That means these city structures that we're finding are the oldest in the world. And to give you a comparison, the Great Pyramid is not even 5,000 years old, and these things are 34 million years old. Phenomenal. Why are they hiding that? Because again, when those have been posted, they will go in and blur it so you can't tell that what we originally found. And again, thanks to the print key on my keyboard, I've been able to save these, and I'm able to show people before and after shots.
That's really cool. I was listening to someone recently who was saying that every 25,000 years or whatever, something like that, there's some kind of cataclysmic event on Earth, like a pole shift, and that can cause a certain area to flash freeze. And they're saying it's very possible that the Antarctica area could have flash frozen all of this stuff there from hundreds of thousands or millions of years ago. That's all just sitting there, and then everything else has been what's been built in the interim.
Correct.
So
I mean,
if
we've
we
even found fossils that clearly are vegetation you would find like in a jungle in Antarctica. And they're for real. So yeah, those kind of changes have happened. I don't know what it's like to be on the planet when something like that happens. I don't know if you could hold on tight enough to hold on, but yeah, we've had some major events happen in the ancient past.
Yeah, you'd probably have to be in one of those underground bases to make it.
Even then, you might not.
Right. So you've done work or research rather on Mars. You want to get into some of that?
I absolutely, yeah, I will, and I'll start with one that kind of surprised me. Normally, when I use Google Earth to explore Mars or Earth or whatever, I go from right to left or left to right. Well, you got to jump out of the box every once in a while. I thought, okay, I'm going to start exploring from pole to pole. And I found 27 square cut entrances into the planet spread out over 16 miles. And these are not ancient. These look like contemporary entranceways. In round figures, they range from 400 to 1,000 feet in width. I would never have discovered that if I had kept going from east to west or west to east. And that was something I had not expected. I don't have my notes in front of me right now, but the man who was in charge of Israeli space security for nearly 30 years, Hyman Ashid, I probably mutilated his name, but it's something like that. And he had a great reputation, and he decided he had nothing to lose. He made a statement in the Jerusalem Post in December of 2020 and said that like I said, I wish I could quote it to you exactly, but he basically said that the ETs and the American astronauts are working together underground in Mars. And he stated it a different way, but that was the essence of what he said. And the more I find there, the more I'm convinced that there is evidence that, yeah, something's going on there.
Now, I didn't find the doors you were talking about, but I did find doors that corresponded with similar doorways in ancient Egypt. Have you seen those?
I don't know specifically what you're thinking of. These are simple entrances, like a warehouse entrance, big open gaping square hole.
Okay, got it. Um, Now there's also other stuff on Mars as well. We've got pyramids, we've got giant structures, what looks like crashed saucers or ships. Have you done any research on those?
I have at least three UFOs that I caught on Google Earth. The largest one I think is like 3.5 miles in diameter. I was simply cruising one day around the North Pole and kept zooming in, and I found this. And it's round with it's raised in the middle. Even from Earth, we've seen UFOs that are round with a hub in the middle, and it's the same basic design. There's another one where it looks like a crash landing of a UFO, and it goes scooting across the surface of Mars. I was able to measure that because there is a measuring tool with Google Earth, and the skid mark is over 4,400 feet in length. And then you can see where the edge of this round disc finally comes to a stop in the soil of Mars. That one I think that was like 400 and something feet in diameter. So they will vary in size, and those are two of the ones that are coming to mind right now.
Yeah, those are really big.
But see, when you find pyramids and stuff on Mars, you can go, okay, that may just be ancient. Again, over the years, just cruising the planet, I have found two things that look like human-made habitats. Back in the 80s, maybe before, I saw artistic drawings and plans and sketches for habitats so that humans could live on other planets. And the ones that I found near the poles in Mars look similar in structure. The first one I found, I believe it was in 2011, and it was 700 feet in length. I think it was nearly 5 years later, I found the one in the South Pole, and it basically the same kind of design, but it was literally 10 times bigger. It was 7,000 feet in length. So I found two of those that look like, they're fuzzy, but they look like contemporary habitats. And that to me is conclusive, or it helps you reach to the conclusion that yes, we are there and we are doing things.
So if all of that is real and the military official from Israel is telling the truth, that means that all of this, we're going to go to Mars in 20 years and we have a rover there, that's all just theater.
That's how I regard it. They have technology that few of us could imagine, that I think they can get there rather quickly. This rocket technology is primitive, and I do think it's theater. I think it's a good way to label it.
Well, yeah, in order to get there without, well, in any reasonable amount of time, they're probably using something other than internal combustion engines.
Without
So,
a doubt. Without a doubt.
yeah, I mean, this is likely reverse engineered ET stuff or just things that we've created in labs that they don't want to release to anybody.
I agree.
Hmm. It's kind of sad because I mean, imagine what the world would look like if we just open sourced all of that stuff.
I do not know why we have to be secretive about everything. And to this day, there are people who are threatened if they talk too much. The witnesses about the underground facilities, their lives have been threatened if they talk. Um, One guy, again, I wish I had the notes right in front of me. He's the one that told me about the underground facility at Mount Mitchell. And his words are more chilling. My summary is not as chilling, but he had a man show up and threatened him and said, "You better keep his mouth shut." And then he pulled his coat open and he had um, a knife on each hip in a holster. And he took out one of the knives and it was a short blade, rounded curve. And he said, "Do you know what this is?" And it goes on. And basically, it is the kind of knife that's used to slit people's throats. And he told him if he talked that he and his family might find themselves with slitted throats. So the threats still are very real.
Yeah, that's crazy. My hope is that people that are not associated with government stuff or people who are bound by something will find a way to either discover this stuff or build it themselves and then just release it to everyone, which could also have consequences, but I mean, at least the truth would be out and maybe we could advance human technology.
Um, we are living in a time when truth is coming out. It may not be coming out as fast or in the ways that we would prefer, but it is coming out. And there are so many shows, so many books, so many podcasts that are getting pieces of the information out. And that's the way disclosure is happening. People keep talking about waiting for the government to disclose it. The government will only disclose what it's forced to disclose. And so we have a whole army of people who are like yourself trying to get the truth out there. And together we're having an impact.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's pretty fun to be a part of that, to be honest.
Yeah, keep it up.
Likewise. So that pretty much covers everything I had planned for our conversation. Was there anything else that you wanted to touch on?
If you can add to your credits at the bottom, just the website, which is skyshipsovercashers.com. Um, the website's been there since 2008. We have archives in every single section. You could literally get lost in the archives. And the website, I deliberately try to get pictures and images and not just words. And I boldface type to make it easier to skim because I don't want people to get bogged down. I want them to learn something. And something that's important, the book Spy in the Sky, I've been blocked in many ways from getting that information out. And so right now you have to get it through my website. The other books are available on Amazon. And I give a special price and everything. Normally I don't hustle like that on my website, but when I can't get the book out any other way, I don't know what else to do. So if you go to Editor's Corner, you can find out more about that book and how to get it.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I have definitely gotten lost on the site looking around at stuff. I think I spent like 30 minutes just deep diving on all these different topics. So I advise people to go check it out, even just for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Of
And
course.
I wish you the best in your efforts to get the truth out there. We got to keep doing it.
That's right. Well, thanks for coming on.
Thank you. You have a real good day.